Shooting the Shiznit is exclusively sponsored this month by Cloud9 LLC Vapor Company. Cloud9 LLC Vapor Company is your go-to vape shop in Oxford, Mississippi. Located on the West Oxford Loop near Continental Hair Salon. That's right, you can reach them on Facebook at /Cloud9 Vapor Supplies. That's /Cloud9 Vapor Supplies. Or over there on Twitter at Cloud9 Vapor Ox. That's Cloud9 Vapor Ox. Or you can call them at 662-832-6297. Over 300 flavors of juice, and if you need a starter kit, they're the place to go in Oxford, Mississippi. Come in and test all the flavors and tell them that Shooting the Shiznit sent you. Have you listened to episode 110? Reading is your friend. The top 10 Dave Meltzer trolls. Here's a clip. Listen to all the archives at www.stspod.club. And but Dave's number one, he's not going to let people just sit there and say, "Oh, Bruno sold out, 1,200 Madison Square Gardens from 1983 to, it's horseshit." That's all they do. News, and if that tells you anything, the things that we know about wrestling, and that the real news reports that such horseshit, that should tell you that the real news, all the stuff that they report, if anything about wrestling, most of the time their facts are totally wrong. And, I don't have to defend Meltzer on this one. He can say what he wants to say, but it's the fucking truth. That was it. It was the fucking truth.
Yeah, it was this week's controversy, obviously. It's just, if it wasn't clear to you how Dave revered Bruno from the obituary that he wrote in this week's issue, which is a masterpiece. I mean, it's so painfully obvious if you only took the time to read it, how respectfully it's written and how thoroughly it's researched. I mean, what was he supposed to do? Just let the exaggeration not be corrected? I mean, the guy's a reporter and a top-notch reporter, so of course he's going to correct it when somebody, when history perpetuates a mistake. And it's just another one of those, WWF or whatever figures that just got believed as far as being real. And the guy simply corrected it. So I don't know, if they're making the time and the place argument, whatever. But I mean, again, he's simply reporting the facts. And all you have to do is read this week's issue, like you said, read this week's issue to find out how much Dave.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Let's start the party.
Hey, right before we get to the show, I want to take a quick minute to talk about our Patreon site. That's patreon.com/shootingtheshiznit. That's just SHOOTINTHE Shiznit. That's right. What I want to do is we got a $2 tier, a $5 tier, and a $25 tier. The $2 tier, well, it's just a donation. $5 donation, guys. Just whatever you think our 8, 9, 10 episodes a month is worth. We do appreciate it. We're going to try to wait until we get 10 Patreon members. 10. All we need is 10. And then we're going to start releasing some exclusive material that will go on Patreon. But you can do the feed, and it'll go right into your podcast player, and you'll be able to listen to it. I've got a great idea for a Sunday morning show. It'll be a small, short show, but it'll be something exclusive for the Patreon members. Now, the $25 tier, also you'll be able to listen to all the exclusive material, but guess what? You get a t-shirt. That's right. Every month, you'll get to choose a t-shirt from wehavemerch.com. So now, let's get on with the show. Hey everyone, I welcome Todd Martin. Hey Todd, how's it going? I'm bringing from the green room. He requested, and y'all guys are not going to believe this, he wanted water and milk. That's all he wanted. So hey man, did we take care of you? Did we give you enough water and milk?
I'm very hardcore. The Sandman would be proud of me.
Oh man, Kurt Angle, the milk. See, that's where you get that from. There we go. Todd, here's the weird thing. I'm always behind about 3 years on everything. And I see you on Twitter making some comment about current stuff, and I was like, oh my God, that's Todd. He, wait, he's not with the Wrestling Observer anymore? And I was like, wait, he's with the Torch? And I was like, what the hell's going on? And then I thought, man, I'm going to bring him on because he's been, he's been part of wrestling, or I remember your name talking about wrestling for a long time. But I want to start. At the beginning. What actually made you become a wrestling fan? I like to ask people that.
Yeah, so I mean, with me, I first started to remember watching wrestling when I was living in Singapore as a kid, which would have been around 1988 to 1990, and towards the latter end of it. And I had a friend, and I'd come over for to his house for sleepovers, and he was a big wrestling fan, so we'd go to the video store and rent various wrestling tapes. And I remember watching some tapes with them. The first one I remember watching is WrestleMania 6, and so we'd watch tapes of that. And I was sort of compelled by it, and I'd watch the weekly television show that they had there. And then that was sort of sporadic now and then. I wasn't that big into it. But the point when I actually got big into it was when I went back to the States in 1991, because I realized when I got back to the States that the tapes that I'd been watching the TV I'd been watching in Singapore was actually 6 months delayed. And so when I got back to the States, I had all of these storylines paid off. So it was like, all of this stuff I've been watching, I could find out all of like the information immediately. It was like, the equivalent of, a bunch of pay-per-views hitting you all at once. And so I was just, devouring all the stuff I could get as far as, like magazines and, the television, just sort of learning what was going on, along with the fact that now I could watch WCW, and there was just sort of a lot of wrestling around. So that was when I sort of became more interested in it, was 1991.
Wow. So, I always like asking this question is, and I tell my story. I went to professional wrestling. I went to a show. The first show I went to was how I become a fan. And I was about 5 feet away from a Memphis spot show. Pretty much knew from day one that it was a work. But I didn't really care. I didn't care that it was a work. I didn't know how it was done, but really didn't give a shit.
Same here.
Yeah. Is that how you did you pretty much know it was work from day one, or?
Yeah, pretty much. I don't ever remember thinking that wrestling was real. I remember the thing with I remember, like I mentioned, WrestleMania 6 being the first show I can remember watching, and the first big. I thought of this for years as being the first match on the show, but it wasn't the first match on the show. But it was the first big match on the show. Was Demolition against the Colossal Connection, Haku and Andre the Giant, and this was during the time period when Andre the Giant was basically immobile. It was it was sad. It was towards the end of his career, and I remember watching this as a kid and thinking, why is Haku working 90% of this match? Like, why doesn't he just tag in the Giant? Like, the Giant will destroy these people. He's so much bigger than them, and immediately my eyebrows were raised about the strategy of this tag team match in terms of what they were trying to do here.
Yeah, you bring up Demolition, one of those tag teams back then that, a lot of us hated because we were big, huge Road Warrior fans, and it took me years to go back. When I started managing tag teams, I went back to watch all these big tag teams and watch the psychology of them, and I remember thinking, going back to look at that match, it's all about, getting Andre in, and it's just basic psychology. But another reason is you didn't want to have Andre in because he couldn't do anything. So
yeah. Yeah, Demolition, by the way, is a great break in terms of like what sort of fan you were, because like you said, like if you were a fan of the business in general, like, that was, Demolition was the Road Warrior knockoffs. And if you were a fan that was principally following the WWF at that time, Demolition was, this great tag team. So that's a real sort of, and there are lots of indications of that at every period of wrestling, the sort of, the distinction between the people that are following it more closely and the people that are following it more loosely.
Right. You're right about that, because that was because I was a fan of everything. So being trading videotapes and everything, I just felt like they were almost like a fast forward. I would fast forward through the matches because I didn't like what Vince had done. And I've made a joke on the show that, back in the day, if the Young Bucks were popular, Vince would already have his team, call them something else, but they would be just like the Young Bucks and not even worry about them. So things like that have surprised me about Vince now compared to what he would do back then. So we talked about technologies, we always talk about technology on this show, that it actually changes the fandom of professional wrestling in the sense that, we had TV first, and then you have cable, and then you have VHS trading was huge with fans. I mean, with me, you and people, did you trade tapes also?
I didn't trade tapes. I bought tapes because I didn't have enough of a budget to be able to. And what I'm about to say sounds a little bit contradictory because it's easier to trade tapes than to pay for tapes. But in order to trade tapes, you need like a big collection of tapes to trade. And so it was people they'd have a bunch of VHS of a bunch of stuff, and they'd then be able to trade it back and forth. I wasn't able to build up that library until later, and so and by that period, tape trading was becoming less popular. And so essentially I'd order, All Japan or New Japan shows from RF Video, ECW. Smoky Mountain was available in my area. So I'd get them occasionally, but I wasn't able to get them on a regular basis like the tape traders who had more disposable income than, 15, 16-year-old me.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard to do. I remember getting the first VCR. People think I'm crazy when I talk about, I think it was $800, and we got it through this company where you pay a little bit every month, and I think it ended up costing my mom $1,200 for a VCR. So you weren't going to get two of them to make copies of stuff when it first started at all. So talking about, technology, you become part of tell me the story. Are you a trained? Did you go to college to become a writer? That's my Todd Martin with you, which is kind of funny. One of my best friends of all time, and was in my last wedding, is named Todd Martin. So every time I always see your name, I think, hey, there's Todd.
And is he the tennis player, or is he not the tennis player?
No, not at all.
Because that's when I get occasionally.
Yeah,
I'm always amused when I get added with someone trying on Twitter with somebody trying to reach the tennis player, talking about their looking forward to seeing me at the U.S. Tennis Open. But yeah, as far as the question about the writing in college, no, I have absolutely no writing training. I've never worked on a newspaper. I've never taken any classes in that. My degree in college was in political science, and then I got a law degree. So I'm a complete amateur when it comes to journalism.
And you've been doing it for how many years now?
16 years. Yeah.
Awesome. So you started now. Tell me how you started doing everything that you did, because, like I said, when I become familiar with your name, I don't think me and you've ever talked before, but I knew who you were. It was because of the Wrestling Observer website. So how did all that happen, or how did you start, writing about wrestling?
Well, so in the mid '90s, as I think a lot of fans are, I gravitated towards the PWI magazines, and then when I heard about the Torch and the Observer and the newsletters, that was the next step. And so I started subscribing to the Observer in 1995, and I'd write Dave letters from time to time. And as he was going online, I would write him more frequently because it was easier to do than writing letters. And after sending him in results to a house show probably a TV taping that I've been to, at one point he said, "Hey, why don't you write some more for a website?" And so I said, "Sure." And so I started writing occasional columns for the website, and then that turned into reports about Monday Night Raw, which I did for, a great many years, and then eventually podcasts. So that was sort of the metamorphosis.
And that was, I always went, when I wasn't following Raw, I always went to read your Raw reports to see what the hell was going on. Or I would always go, when I'm watching this show, I'd always go back and read it afterwards, because not that I always agreed with you. I sometimes said Todd's full of shit and he don't know what he's talking about. There would be something that you didn't like that I'd absolutely love. And the same thing with Meltzer now or Wade, in the past, but you would always make that comment about something I liked, and it would last maybe 6 months and then you'd get off of it. But it was always funny because I would always go, hey, why does he not see this the way I see He sees everything else the way I do. I think that I made a comment a couple of shows ago about Meltzer and saying, he watched that match. Why didn't he like that match? He really is smoking weed now. That's what I said about Dave. And I love Dave today. I talked to Dave just recently, but yeah, I just made that comment, the Jim Cornette comment of why that Dave likes, PWG, because he smokes weed in California. Go ahead.
Well, you can do that in a lot of different places, but yeah, I mean that's I think that's true of a lot of people. We have our own little preferences, and we'll like this or that. And yeah, I mean I'd always get that. I'd get people saying nice things, and then I'd get people saying, oh, how could you say this was so bad, or sort of the middle where they'd say, I like your reports, but I disagree with this in specific. And yeah, I mean that was sort of a common thing for years. One thing I think about the written word relative to podcasts, and one of the reasons I've sort of enjoyed doing podcasts over the years is I think if you're listening to podcasts, you can sort of get a sense for people that there's sort of when you have a written report, you can get sort of an image of the way someone's thinking about something and sort of perceive them to be like a curmudgeon or sort of grumpy about it or whatnot. And if you listen to them talk, you can tell, they're just giving their opinions on it. It's not like sort of like a, like an angry thing. But if you put it in print, people can get a false impression about the way you're coming at it. And because during the period that I was writing about Raw, it was during a period I think that's coincided with Raw declining in quality. I think people would get the impression that I was more down on some of the stuff than I was. I was just sort of giving my opinion, but it wasn't like it was I was sort of trying to make everyone hate it, which I think was sometimes the perception.
Perfect. What I do is for a shoot job, which is none of no one's business. But I teach people. That's one of the things that I do is that I'm in technical support. I used to be with phones, but I'm now in chat. And I have to teach people how to say things to help customers. And it's a total different thing. And it's hard for me. It was real hard for me going to that. And with this, the podcast, you can tell, if you've listened to my podcast long enough, you'll be able to tell what I like and what pisses me off by just the tone of my voice. And, I love it. I love podcasting. There's only 3 or 4 wrestling podcasts. You know that, right?
There's a few here and there, but I feel like there's still a market to be exploited there.
Man, I was in it about 5 years ago or 5 or 6 years ago. I had a podcast and I came back last year, and I just feel like it's just been there's just so many, and there's been so many crop up since then. So talk a little bit. I don't want to be controversial. That's not what this is. My podcast is not about. I've had guys on here who I have to tell them I'm not going to ask them. I'm not a reporter. I'm just having you come on here and talk shit, But you went from the top. You was with the Observer, and then went to the Torch, which was a big deal that I didn't know about 3 years ago. But I read some stuff about it. I know we come to disagreements with people and we leave certain jobs to go to others. But you're sitting here writing for the Observer, and it's you can tell the story if you want to, just a short version. You had a disagreement with someone, and then now you're with Wade. And how's that experience, or how was that experience? Did it do exactly what you thought it was going to do?
I mean, it's been better than I thought it would. Frankly, I'm very happy with how it turned out. Yeah, I mean, it's not a big deal by any means, but yeah, I just was. It's sort of a long, complicated story, but it really was. It really just came down to me and this one other person that I just was tired of being associated with in terms of the website. And they ended up getting rid of him anyway, but. Essentially, my feeling was they wanted me to essentially agree to letting them bring him back somewhere down the road, and my thought process was I just don't want to be associated with this guy, so I'm not really looking to do a 3-year wait and then be associated with him again. So that sort of dragged on for a while, and eventually I just sort of needed to resolve the situation because we hadn't been doing the podcast for a month or so, and I'd reached out to a number of different people and sort of had conversations with them about what what I was going to do. And so I just, I'd had a good, good conversations with Wade. I thought we could do some good stuff. And so we just started doing the podcast there, along with some writing here and there and some other stuff. So it's been, I'm very, I'm very happy with the quality of the Fix show that we've been doing every Wednesday. Wednesday there. I like the shows I was doing with Brian as well, but it was sort of limited in that we were sort of trying to do an hour every week. And with Wade, the big thing is we hit everything that's going on. And so it isn't like sort of stuff is slipping through the cracks, and we don't sort of get diverted as much into sort of like focusing on one thing and then letting other things go. So it's a more all-inclusive sort of show as far as hitting everything that's going on in the wrestling business. And it's allowed me to cover other things because, just hitting Raw and SmackDown every week, that takes up so much of the time. There isn't a lot of time to talk other stuff. So, we do a lot more talk about New Japan, more talk about UFC, ROH, NXT, all sorts of different stuff. So yeah, that's the long short of it.
Good deal, good deal. Let's take a quick commercial and we'll be right back with Todd Martin. Shooting the Shiznit is exclusively sponsored this month by Cloud9 LLC Vapor Company. Cloud9 LLC Vapor Company is your go-to vape shop in Oxford, Mississippi. Located on the West Oxford Loop near Continental Hair Salon. That's right, you can reach them on Facebook at /Cloud9 Vapor Supplies. That's /Cloud9 Vapor Supplies. Or over there on Twitter at Cloud9 Vapor Ox OX. That's Cloud9 Vapor Ox OX. Or you can call them at 662-832-6297. Over 300 flavors of juice, and if you need a starter kit, they're the place to go in Oxford, Mississippi. Come in and test all the flavors and tell them that Shooting the Shiznit sent you. All right, we're back in the studio here with Todd Martin. Hey, Todd, before we get into some of I just want to throw some of the current topics at you. Tell me, at what point, because this is what happened, we've got like 3 or 4 of these websites, and you've been involved with 2 of the biggest ones ever. Now, Wade was a little bit ahead of everybody when it came to, wasn't Wade ahead of most people when it came to doing web? He was ahead of the Observer, I know, but he got into it. At any time, did you think there's going to be X amount of guys making a living just doing wrestling websites? Did you think that would be something possible?
I never really thought about it one way or another. Looking back at it, it makes a lot of intuitive sense because before, when you had just the newsletters, you were, inherently restricted by the business model in the sense that, you had to have people write into these newsletters and then subscribe to them, which is a difficult, it's a big it's a big barrier to entry for the average person. Whereas when you've got the internet, anybody that has an internet connection, and as there get to be more internet connections, you can get people to just log in the websites. And you've still got, if you want to do a subscription-based service, which is what, the preeminent wrestling websites do, that creates another layer, just like the newsletters before. But unlike with the newsletters before, everybody can get to can easily get to the website itself and to figure out what you're doing before deciding if they want to get into it. So in that sense, it makes sense that you'd be able to get more and more people, making a living out of wrestling as the internet expanded. And we've seen that thus far, and I don't see any reason why that would move backwards. I think, there are probably going to be different types of monetization going forward, but I think there are going to be more people making a living in the future than there have been thus far.
A perfect example is in the last, I guess 12 months, maybe, you got a guy like Conrad Thompson who, is doing podcasts with people that, and making them some extra cash. And a guy like Bruce Pritchard talk about he's on the road all the time, which I find, here's Bruce Pritchard been sitting at home for how many years and he's making, decent money doing what he's doing. All right, we're going to talk about MMA, and cause that is in wrestling. You do more MMA, right?
I probably for the torch, I probably end up talking more. Definitely end up talking more about wrestling. But I also do MMA writing for other sites. So I mean, I think in terms of like my overall focus, it's probably about equal. But for Wade, it's more heavily on the wrestling side.
All right. Well, I pulled up a tweet today. It was by Masked Republic, and I thought it was really neat, all the stuff that he had said that has been going on this year, and thought it would be fun to hear your opinion of it. What was your thoughts on, when the Young Bucks and Cody, they did the big sellout, and I'll actually be there. I'm only about 5 hours from Chicago, so we're going to be there for that show. What was your thoughts on when that happened?
In terms of the day that they sold it out?
Yeah, I mean, was that something that you said? Did you say, hey, I think these guys have a potential of doing this?
Going in, I wasn't sure, but I didn't think that they'd sell it out on the first day. I was surprised by that. And it's a reflection of a changing culture in terms of internet, hardcore wrestling fans, in that, there's been this group for a significant period of time, but I don't know what it is, but over time, there's sort of been this increased willingness to spend money for the occasional major event. And, for years that was, ordering a major pay-per-view or, buying merchandise or, going for like one show a year. But now increasingly there's this group of people that are willing to travel for what they perceive to be a big wrestling event. And, we saw sort of the initial signs of that with New Japan when they came over and were able to do very well for their early shows. And All In was sort of the next step on that. And then, the sellout of Madison Square Garden was, the next step beyond that. And I think that's likely going to be the case for, from now for at least, the immediate future is if you've got a card that feels like a really big deal to those people, you can get a significant number of people to fly in. Now, the key is getting people to perceive it to be that way, because even if you have a bunch of people that are willing to spend that money, you have to be able to make it feel like it's worth their while. And that, that's not always going to be the case. And, how you convince them of that is, I think, not as easy as it may seem to some people right now.
Right. I'm thinking, 4 shows a year may do that. I was shocked about both sellouts. I was really shocked about the Ring of Honor sellout. I had people message me on Twitter say, are you going to go to the Garden? I love what Ring of Honor did. I'm not going to the Garden, but what Ring of Honor did, I think it was just the way they sold the tickets first to their group, to the streaming service people and everything. That was just genius, and then being able to make them feel special and everything. So I'm excited. I mean, that's one thing about that I don't watch WWE on a regular basis anymore, and I'm not one of those fans that's going to say, WWE sucks. I don't believe that. I find myself with limited hours and watch what I like, and it's usually New Japan and I don't even like the Ring of Honor TV show, but I like the people that are on it. Put it that way. I think that's the best way of putting it. Something else that's happened recently, and
I think there are a lot of people in that boat.
Yeah, that just like I mean, I'm a fan of probably every one of the guys, at least close to 95% of the guys that are going to be on the All In show. So that makes it, interesting to me. And some of the guys, I remember growing up, and I had seen most of the big names, live. That was one of the things that I always like to see. I seen a Flair Steamboat. I seen this. I seen that. But as I got older, I didn't go to live events. Now it's like, well, I can go to this show. I can see all these guys that I've never seen live. So it's a big deal. And I see them spending. Wrestling fans are spending so much more money now with WWE and independent, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing for the boys. Something else that I found just totally interesting, because me and you have been around this for years to watch it happen, is that you've seen like AAA, CMLL. You got all these guys now that are working both promotions, Ray Phoenix, LA Park, Pentagon, and you got, Conan goes back to AAA, and what do you think that what makes you think that they relax their "you're not only working for me" kind of thing?
It's a darn good. Really, I feel like the bigger question is why they were so rigid for so many years. I mean, Paco just really had that thing where he just didn't want to use people from other promotions, and there's something to be said for that, right? In the sense that it's sort of you isolate your own people; they sort of are doing their own little thing, and people you don't give the rub to other promotions, and because you have the tradition, because CMLL has been around, forever. Really,
right,
it has more of a legacy than any other promotion in the world. Because you had that they can sort of feel like they can just operate in their own ecosystem. But yeah, I mean, it made sense that if you brought in people from other promotions, that people would be excited for these, new matchups. And indeed, it's led to a lot of big business, because they've been doing that. So, I mean, the biggest thing to me in terms of the story is just the switch in in philosophy in Paco Alonso, because we sometimes people will talk about Vince McMahon, and Vince McMahon being very set in his ways, and when you've got someone that's sort of very set in their ways and has a certain way of doing things, it's rare to see them just sort of break out and go in another direction. And when they do, when somebody's really rigid and set in their ways and they then make that switch, it usually tends to work out pretty well, because there usually is a pretty darn good impetus to move away from what you're used to doing, and it leading to success. And that's certainly been the case thus far with CMLL.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was Belcher or someone who wrote, this is equal to, and people didn't I made a big deal about it, and people don't understand this would be equal to maybe when WWE and WCW was at the height, and they had a really good hot guy on WCW that was doing real well, and he tells them, I'm going to go work I'm going to work WrestleMania, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to work the next big show for you. And you're not going to tell me what to do. Each promotion's going to pay me. So that's the kind of stuff that, that to me is just a total change in the business. And like you said, the way we think, the way the promoters think, which is a good thing. It shows it's a good thing. They were averaging 3,000 or 4,000 people, and I think the lowest crowd in the last 4 months has been around 8. And I've actually went to start watching them again, which is something I hadn't watched in a long time. All right, I got to talk about one more wrestling thing real quick. Colt and CM Punk is the big story going on right now, and I've seen what you've tweeted and everything, but give your opinion of this. So me and you, we decided to go to court, and it was your podcast, Todd, and I got on the podcast, and I talked about Vince McMahon, and Vince McMahon decided to sue me, but I'm the one with the money. I've got tons of money, and I say, Todd, look, I text you, dude, we're going to court. I'll pay for it. Don't worry. You don't have to pay anything. So at what point does this become, is that legally binding? Do you think, can they say, all right, he agreed to do it?
Well, the key to the whole thing is, and this is a very basic principle in contract law, is that in order to form a contract between two parties, there needs to be consideration on both sides. And that means that both parties have to give something in order for them to be a contract, and amongst other requirements for a contract. And so if I promise something to you or you promise something to me, that in and of itself doesn't mean anything in terms of a contract. If I say, hey, I'm gonna pay you $500 a week for the next year, and I give you $500 week 1, and I give you $500 week 2, and I give you $500 week 3, and then I stop giving you the money. There's no contract there. It's nice of me to be giving you the money, but the court isn't going to enforce that. And so the key to this case, and Colt, I think, comes across sympathetic in what happened.
Yeah, very much so.
But that's different than whether they had a contract between the parties. And that's going to be, I think, the key to the whole thing. And Colt is trying to establish that there was a contract on the basis that he asked Punk about this situation around the time that he was thinking of responding to the request from Amon. And so the argument he's making is, I agreed, hey, I won't respond to Amon's request, and you in turn will take care of the legal expenses. Now, number of problems with this. Number one, it wasn't stated out very clearly. Like the language, you'll be taken care of, or you'll be covered rather. That's sort of vague. What that means exactly, I'm not sure. I would want stronger language for a promise to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it also isn't so clearly tied up on the other end, him not responding to Amon, because why would Punk care about him not responding to Amon? Like, why would Punk care about this podcast being up or not? Like, it's not like that affects him any. People had already listened to the podcast. I don't think he particularly was concerned about whether people listen to the podcast or not. And Colt, I don't think, had a lot to offer Amon, which is sort of central to the argument, because, Colt didn't know whether what Punk was saying was true or not. He was Punk's friend. I don't think there was any sort of, behind the scenes secrets that he could give in the case. The way it comes across to me, looking at this thing was, Punk was offering to help out. He later decided for whatever reason that he wasn't going to later, but the offer to help out wasn't tied to a contract to agree to do something. And without that contractual relationship, it's unfortunate if Punk later decided he wanted to stop. He wanted to rescind his offer to pay the legal bills, but that doesn't mean that Punk was legally obliged to pay the legal bills. If, say, he said, to make it, a really clear example, that, Punk said, hey, look, I know that these legal bills are going to be really expensive, so I'll pay these legal bills for you, and you come and mow my lawn every week. And it doesn't. Contracts don't even have to be like equal consideration. If Cabana's coming over there and every week he's mowing CM Punk's lawn and Punk's paying the legal bills, and one week Punk says, I've decided to stop paying these legal bills. At that point, it's a much more clear contract. Both sides were giving something in, and that I think is going to be key to the whole case, is whether there is a contract formed. And I'm not terribly convinced that Colt's going to do very well, putting aside the fact that we haven't seen Punk's response yet. And my guess is that Punk's response is likely going to have some information that cuts against Colt's claims.
Right. And I mean, as soon as I seen it, I thought Punk really came out, looking like a total prick. But, you make a lot of good points there. It's just interesting. And I hate it that it's a lot of things to do with the wrestling business. You lose friends because of stuff like this. But apparently they've been friends for a long time. Let's talk I'm going to talk real briefly about MMA because we're kind of almost out of time here. But a couple of things that just came to mind. And we don't talk a lot about MMA here, but Conor McGregor. So you okay with them bringing him back?
Sure. I mean, he makes so much money that, I mean, I think, in every form of entertainment, there are standards and double standards and triple standards depending upon who the person is. I mean, should the UFC have made a little bit more of a show of punishing him, given like how dangerous him attacking the bus was and how out of control it was? Yeah, I think they probably should have, but I'm not a big, hand wringing, think of the children sort. Like, it's the fight game. What he did was bad. They probably shouldn't be glorifying in video packages, but I mean, they need big fights. Conor McGregor is big business, and I want to see Conor McGregor against Khabib Nurmagomedov. So, I'm willing to accept, that the situation's kind of screwed up on some, on a few levels.
I'm glad you said that guy's name instead of me, though. I appreciate that. Well, if I'm Dana White, I don't give a two fucks about what anybody says, because he makes me money, and I see what you're saying. I feel the same way too. As a fan, I actually liked watching him and liked his attitude and everything. As someone that I would hang out with, no, I would, I'd want to punch him and he'd probably whip my ass. But he's one of those guys that I probably couldn't be around. All right, so last but not least, Brock Lesnar in DC. Is that as big as we think it is, or do we think it's even going to happen?
I think it's going to happen. I mean, we'll see. I mean, it's entirely possible that Brock is playing the UFC and wants to re-sign with WWE. But I mean, WWE has done one heck of a number on his marketability. I don't know if they'd want to invest a gigantic amount of money to keep him around, given that he's going to have a big offer from UFC. And as far as the Cormier fight, yeah, that feels like a really big fight. I mean, that post-fight confrontation with those two was pretty much pitch perfect. And I think it's an intriguing fight. I think there will be people that'll talk themselves into thinking either guy's going to win, and I think they're going to do a good job of selling the fight. I think you're looking at a really big fight there in early 2019.
I feel the same way, and usually I'm a casual fan when it comes to MMA, but I go for the big fights, and this is one of those where I'm saying, oh my God, I've got to see this one. And then anything, when I found out Conor was coming back, that was the thought that came to me. I've got to see this fight. So that kind of gives me an indication who I think, not that I'm perfect, but that's the kind of stuff that as a casual fan, you get those extra amount of buys to watch something. Hey, Todd, I want to thank you for joining us. Before I do my little catchphrase at the end here, go ahead and put your stuff over. How can we reach you on Twitter? And what podcast do you do every week? I mean, just give us a big rundown real quick.
Sure. Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Twitter handle is Todd Martin MMA, so you can find me there. I do the weekly podcast called The Fix with Wade Keller on Wednesdays. Talking all the latest happenings in wrestling, and you can get that as part of a PW Torch VIP subscription, which is a great value. A lot of stuff you get for your money there. Big archive of newsletters, whole bunch of shows, all sorts of stuff there. So you can find that at pwtorch.com. I also do a weekly column for SureDog.com, long time resource for the MMA community. It's called The Bottom Line. You can check that out every familiar phrase. You can check that out every Tuesday. So I have my columns up there, and if you're looking for rundowns of the major UFC pay-per-views along with rankings, I do those at the Los Angeles Times at latimes.com. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Man, you sound like a very, very busy man. All right, guys. Same bat time, same bat channel on the best little wrestling podcast in the business. Be there. And I love my mama. All right. Thank you, man.
Thanks. My pleasure.
That catchphrase started at one thing. Now I got four. Hey, that was another great episode of Shooting the Shiznit. I do appreciate you guys joining us. We're always looking for contestants for Who Wants to Be the Best Shiznit Ever. We have shirts. That's right. We have merch.com. And shirts start at $12.99 and sizes all the way up to 6XL. A big thank you to Cloud9 LLC Vapor Club. That's our sponsor for this month. It is the go-to vapor shop in Oxford, Mississippi. Remember, Patreon side. It's our Patreon side. We're trying to get 10 Patreons. That's patreon.com. Shooting the Shiznit without a G. That's right. Bob McGee at Pro Wrestling's Between the Sheets. That's www.pwbts.com. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Gene Jackson at localstolegends.com. Sean Garmer at Wrestling to Max website. That's w2mnet.com. And our buddies over there at WrestlingNewsCenter.com. All you guys posted, we do appreciate it. You can reach me at Comic Book Mark BT, at Shooting the Shiznit on Instagram. That Comic Book Mark BT is on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We have a Facebook page. We also have a Cool Kids Wrestling and MMA Talk Facebook group. You have to ask to join. We don't like you, we kick you out. All the archives are at www.stspod.club. We're on iTunes. We're on Stitcher, Player FM, Podcast Addict, Spreaker, and all the other fine podcast players. A big shout out to Creative Control. These are our podcast brothers. Yeah, that's right. Creative Control over there. JoJo Feeney, also the Creative Control Network. Keeping it 100 with Conan. We do appreciate all the plugs and the helps there. P3 Radio with my buddy Max. Listen to the Red So Fine episode. That's one of my favorite. And two non-wrestling podcasts that I just love to listen to. It's Who's Right Podcast and Po Boys Podcast. The last couple episodes on Po' Boys have been really great episodes. Y'all guys reach out. Try to listen to our podcast brethren, all right? Brethren, whatever you want to call it. If you're still listening. If you're still listening all the way to the end. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now let's get on with the day.